Please note, the following episode contains some references to childbirth and complications of childbirth, which some listeners may find distressing.
I wanted to share this story.
So one of the things that I sometimes struggle with,
my family still tease me about a time when
there were lots of people walking by. It was quite busy and loud.
I think this is again kind of hits back with our point of a new start. So when you have this...
I actually still find it difficult to realise that this is the same birth and the same baby. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the Submissions Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Wherever you are, however you listen to podcasts, we hope that this one achieves its intentions of being a platform to explore and share stories from Muslims.
We mentioned last week that we named this podcast Submissions for two main reasons. To remind ourselves that our daily activity, our prayer, our actions, our moments, our heartbeats are all for the sake of Allah. In submission to Him, we are able to grow, and in submitting to His will and His plans, we are able to gain closeness to Him. Our second reason was that the stories we share, your submissions, are pieces of history that are entrusted to us by the storyteller. In submitting your stories, you are submitting a part of your reflections, a small part of your memories, and sharing it for Muslims and people of other faiths all over the world.
Over the next few episodes, we will share stories from everyday Muslims doing everyday things. Some of the stories will make you chuckle, some of them will leave your heart glowing, and some of them might make you feel anxious or feel on edge. All of them are true stories told with the authentic voices of the Muslims who experienced them.
Between the stories, you will hear from a couple of members of the submissions team, talking and reflecting about the stories and sharing their own thoughts and insights while stimulating discussion.
We pray that we can achieve all we intend and more for the sake of Allah to whom we submit. Bismillah, this is Submissions.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Fazan, I'm 23 and a junior doctor from Milton Keynes, and I'm really excited to be one of the hosts for the podcast today.
Assalamu alaikum, I'm Inaya, I'm 27, a junior doctor from London, and I'm your second host. Today's stories in particular are all centred around one birth, as told through the perspectives of three individuals, the aunt, the mother and the father. When we think about a new start, we often remember everything about the day, whether it's the birth of a new member of the family, starting a new job, or setting foot in a new place for the first time. It is amazing to realise how many details we retain in our memories. For me, when I think of a new start, I genuinely think of the birth of my brothers, in particular the first one. I was 6 years old and I remember being so excited to finally have a sibling when everyone around me already had siblings. And I think it's amazing that even now, so many years later, I can remember the smells, the sights, every moment of that day from the moment that I woke up. I remember it as if it was just yesterday. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about when we experience these things, how they really commit themselves into our memories.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, really. Especially the fact that you said about smells and the sounds. I feel like these are things we really remember. Personally, I'm the youngest child, so I don't remember the birth of any of my siblings. But for me, I think a new start was when I joined university. So moving to London and being there on the first day, I remember like distinctly looking up at the new halls of residence and the grass was being cut and remembering all those smells. And it's obviously a bit of anxiety as well, being in a new place, not knowing what's going to be happening. But I remember the excitement as well of just having my own room and, finally starting something new.
One of the really cool things about new starts is always how quickly they then become routine or quickly become part of your daily life. So the same as when my brother was born or when you started university, in the beginning it's all new and then soon it becomes part of your everyday life and so integral to everything that you're doing. So that's something I find really, really interesting as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm sure our speakers today will have got somewhat used to their new start. Let's hear from our first storyteller. This is Mahnur. She's also one of the co-creators of the podcast, and she tells us the story of how she became an aunt for the first time.
You know that feeling of when someone tells you something and follows it with, but don't tell anyone, it's a secret. And you just keep thinking to yourself about how to not tell anyone, even though you wouldn't naturally tell anyone, but you just want to do a really good job of keeping the secret. Yeah, that's how I felt when I got a call one day in April 2018 from my brother and sister-in-law, who were both on the line together, which I found quite strange. But I moved on, and my brother said Shanza, my sister-in-law, had been in hospital. I was understandably concerned, even more so because I knew in the weeks before she had been feeling quite unwell and nauseous, and we had looked into all of the obviously predictable things, like her being pregnant, and hadn't found that to be one of the causes. I'll tell you what happened, he says, but you can't tell anyone yet. And then I'm thinking, they both simultaneously excitedly yell on the phone that she was pregnant. And I was ecstatic. I was so excited to become an auntie and to have a niece and to be in the same city as my niece as well. Growing up with families spread across the world, that seemed like a dream come true. A few weeks before Shanza's due date, she asked me to be in the room with her and my brother during the birth. I was extremely flattered to be able to witness the birth of my niece, the very beginning of her life, and share this intimate journey with them, and graciously accepted. So on Sunday, 16th December 2018, I had planned a great day for myself. I had decided that due to my academic commitments in my final year of medical school, I had missed out on far too many things in London. And I was going to prioritize going to as many events that I could logistically afford to go to. So one of the things that I had booked for that day was a Google Curiosity Room. And the other thing that I had booked was a talk on Islam's legacy in India, the rise of the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire, taking place at a mosque in Dalston. So I woke up on the morning, I got ready, I made my way to Dalston and found a cute little mosque tucked away in a quiet corner, found myself a seat and looked at my phone, contemplating turning it off so that I could really take in this talk. I'd made so much effort to clear out my day and weekend and make sure I studied through the week so I could be there. As the talk starts, I look down at my phone, about to turn it off, get distracted into the words that he starts speaking, and look down at my phone again and see a message. Shanza has gone into labor. Almost like a knee-jerk reaction, I pick up my stuff, quietly looked around, and snuck out of the room. I instinctively started mapping out my journey to get to this hospital in northwest London, realizing it would take me close to 2 hours. I get onto the bus that will take me there, and I can't stop smiling and praying. I started praying for my sister-in-law. I started praying for ease during this difficult journey. I started praying for the health of my niece, about to be brought into this world through a really difficult passage. I started thanking God for giving me this opportunity to be part of this with them. And most of all, I just smiled to myself, thinking it was 2 p.m. on a Sunday that I had intentionally cleared up and planned to spend in a way that I had never spent before, attending events that I felt like I had been missing out on. And I just smiled to myself for 2 whole hours on my way to the hospital, reflecting on how much peace there was in the air surrounding me. I looked around me, the roads were quieter than usual, my journey was shorter than usual, and as mundane as a 2-hour bus ride can be, I really remember every detail of it. I remember what the weather was like, I remember what I felt like throughout the whole journey, I remember what I was looking at my phone, I remember the du'as that I read on my way there. And I really remember thinking, I can't believe this is happening, and couldn't stop smirking about how beautifully convenient the time was for myself and for everybody else that was arriving at the hospital in preparation for Amal's birth. As for the actual delivery and labor, I don't think I'm the best person to relay that story, but fortunately, I know who the best people are, and you're about to hear from them.
I think what really hits me about any kind of story like this is the fact that she was saying that she remembered everything, that it was so vivid, and the way that she was describing everything, which I think is one of the best things about any kind of new start. It really kind of gets your mind working and you vividly remember stuff.
Definitely. And I always find it so cool, especially with these kind of stories of people being born. When when you're younger, you don't have any recollection of it. Like, I don't remember being born, obviously, but it's such an integral and huge part of your parents' life or your aunts and uncles' lives. And I love this kind of moment almost where we're almost in that generation, or we are in that generation where we're becoming aunts or uncles or parents ourselves. And it's such a different experience to when you're a child, because you don't realize how much of an impact these births have in general. And I think even as a kid, even though your biggest start as a kid is probably being born, it's the one that you remember the least, right? But
Yeah.
I think subsequently, as you've put it, subsequently, the more that we live our lives, the more that we start school, then we go through all these different milestones, a new start becomes more and more relevant as a phrase or as something that we understand.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's quite cool.
I feel like Amal listening back to this, it'll be like a surreal experience for her to see. And also, I like the way that she kind of intentionally had cleared up her day for all these events. And it turns out that the biggest event that was happening that day was actually the birth of her niece, which is quite beautiful.
And I think the other beautiful thing as well is that she names the talk that she had a ticket for, and all of these really specific things that I think in any other situation she might have forgotten the name and all of those kind of things, but they're absolutely burned into her memory now because of this monumental day.
Definitely. I want to know what a Google Curiosity Room is. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. So I think we should hear from the next story, which is actually Mahnur's sister-in-law, Shanza. Shanza is 31 when she's not raising her daughter Amal, who is the baby that we will hear about in her story. She's developing a coalition to tackle spiritual abuse in Muslim communities and supporting projects to protect and safeguard Syrian refugees through employment opportunities internationally. So, mashallah, she's a very well-rounded individual, and I'm sure we'll all very much enjoy hearing her take on this experience.
Before having my daughter Amal, I used to think that childbirth was just the most impossible thing that all women who wanted children had to go through and endure. I didn't think that our bodies, or that at least my body, was capable of it, and I thought that I would be permanently scarred and it would be the scariest moment of my life. I had literally no idea how I would survive it, and I remember I would happily have opted for a C-section just to avoid the pain. At about 7 months pregnant, I took an Islamic hypnobirthing course that ended up completely changing the way that I would think about and approach my daughter's birth. The hypnobirthing course was run by an Islamic teacher and a friend of mine who married the principles of Islam with the techniques of hypnobirthing. In it, I learnt about the power of our bodies and the perfect form that they're created in as women to bring human life into this world. I learnt about the importance of tawakkul and its power in actually easing the pain of labor, both physically and emotionally. I learnt about the story of Maryam alayhi salam and her intimate conversations with Allah during her labor and Allah's reassuring her. So, out of a desire to rely on only Allah and the body that He gave me, as well as probably my naivety as a first-time mother, I decided against pain relief and wanted to strengthen my mind and body to witness the miracle of childbirth unfiltered. And I was actually becoming excited about my labor in the weeks prior to it. I remember on that day when my labor began, it was progressing fast, and I started to feel my womb tightening. My contractions were regular and they were growing stronger by the minute. And I knew that she was ready to come, and she would be coming sooner than I'd expected. So I drew on my hypnobirthing techniques and I began my journey inward. I began my intimate conversations with Allah, and I began praising Him and the body that He created for me and for my daughter. And as the contractions got stronger, I retreated even more inwards, and I focused on the du'as that I desperately wanted to make to Him in these moments, when I felt closer to Him than I ever had before, when the reality was that I relied on Him more than I ever had before. when all I knew and all I could see through the pain was literally him. And I remember the midwives and doctors were so surprised by the calm in the room, to the extent that nobody believed I was in active labour or that Amal would actually be coming in the next few hours. Towards the end of my labour, my body felt like it was on fire, and the calm was disappearing, and the pain was now pretty much unbearable. Then it was time to bring Amal into the world, and we had a complication. Her shoulders had become stuck, and she wouldn't be able to come out on her own. So I was told to stop pushing, and this was the hardest thing to do when you're on the last stretch, and you know you're so close. But before I knew it, numerous doctors ran into the room, and the calmness of the room totally disappeared, and everything was clinical. I was contorted quickly, and Amal was pulled out of me. I remember feeling her leave my body, and it was so unreal. But I felt so much relief. I felt like I had just completed this divine mission that Allah had given me, that I was a soldier, and a soldier not destined to become shaheed in this battle, but to witness the power of our minds, in particular when we fortify them with our faith in the power of Allah.
Wow, that was incredible. I think the way that Shanza tells that in such a calm, collected manner, you can really feel how calm she must have been during the process and during the labor, because she uses terms like, my body was on fire and it was unbearable. But even then, the calm in her voice is just so powerful, and it's amazing. And I think one of the things that I reflect on through this is on my experiences in obstetrics when I've worked in the obstetrics department. And even though birth is something that it's a part of nature, we were all born. And I think it's just still amazing how every birth experience is so different. And despite physiologically being very similar, it's so different in the emotions and the different people that go through different things. And just the way that people experience it differently is amazing. And I think with this situation, the complication she talks about is so dangerous. Like having the baby's shoulders stuck is so dangerous for the baby, and still her calm, and you can tell that obviously it was a very stressful situation, but I think it was still amazing how the calm really comes through. And I hear that story and I feel calm afterwards.
Yeah, same. Literally, I was exactly feeling the same thing. It's honestly hats off to her for like staying calm in that situation, even when and she said it was her divine mission to kind of get through and do what she was kind of there to do, which was fascinating for me. Also, I think the beauty of kind of listening to Mahnur's story and then listening to hers is how Shanza's talked about the intimate conversations with Allah that she was having and focusing on the du'as in the moment, and how Mahnur on her bus on the way to the London, North London, was also making her du'as. It's kind of beautiful to see all the way around how the du'as were being made, and remembrance of Allah in a kind of a new start.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think it's so amazing how this hypnobirthing and these techniques that she's used to really center her birth around Allah is an amazing, amazing thing. And you can really see how it's infiltrated into her way of thought and how it's influencing the way that she's reacting to everything. And one of my favorite things was actually near the beginning, where she talks about how excited she was getting for the labor as well, which is, it's really lovely, but it's sweet that she also recognizes her own naivety in that, because I think she perhaps didn't know exactly what she was signing herself up for or what to expect. But even then, the way that she really takes it on board and talks about that mission that she's fulfilled, I think especially when she mentions about not as shaheed, it's a very interesting comment, because how unbearable it must have been for her to even consider that, if that makes sense. So how unbearable that pain must have made her think, am I going to die in this situation? And I think it is something that is worth a mention, and also still, again, just reflecting on how calm she was throughout even those thoughts.
And like you said about the kind of naivety, I think this is again kind of hits back with our point of a new start. So when you have this kind of new beginning, you do have this bit of naivety and not knowing what's going to happen. And that's why it's so beautiful to see how you deal with that naivety and how she was unbelievably calm through the whole process. So I think that kind of calmness that we see from Shanza possibly might be contrasted against what we're going to hear next. The final story in today's trilogy comes from Sheroze, the father of Amal. Sheroze is a writer, director, and filmmaker from London. He's the creator of films such as The Traveller and Strangers in the Night, which is a personal favourite of mine. And he's about to take us all on a funny and heartwarming journey.
At 12 weeks, you'll actually be able to hear the baby. I remember the nurse telling me these words as I stared back, shocked. Really? Yep, she replied. It's a magical moment. I remember being blown away. I was so excited to hear my baby. A few weeks later, I rock up to the hospital with my 12-week pregnant wife. Her name's Shanza. She still wasn't showing, bar for the fact that she had a very tough first trimester. Nausea, vomiting, the whole shebang. It was really tough for me to watch and see how little I could do to support. I would do anything to be able to take that pain away from her. In sickness and in health, that's what I signed up for. I would take a bullet for Shanza. But on the other hand, I'm also a self-diagnosed sufferer of man flu. A bit of sickness is license for me to lie down in bed and be shocked that the world hasn't collapsed in their sympathy for my struggle. I would be the worst pregnant carrier. I'm pretty sure any man would. I remind Shanza of this, but she doesn't appreciate the fact. So anyway, we proceed to the scan. I remember being in the waiting room and reading the NHS leaflet on skin to skin. It was like poetry. Skin to skin is a phenomenon where the baby experiences almost miraculous benefits from having its skin touching the bare skin of its parents. Both mother and father should strive to enjoy this beautiful moment as soon after delivery as possible. Wow, I'd only seen deliveries in films, but never seen the dude do skin to skin with a baby. I wanted that bond. I wanted that connection. I wanted that skin to skin. So now, at the doctor's office, she places the cool gel on Shanza's belly. She reminds us all, are you ready to hear your baby? I've never been more ready for anything in my life. I was so excited. I felt like we were finally going to communicate. Like I would finally have that moment where baby Ben's little hand grabs Ross's finger in Friends. I was finally going to feel like a dad. The doctor places the device on the belly, and we hear all kinds of sounds. A shallow metronome, muffled waves, dull crashes, the friction of the ultrasound against Shanza's skin. Everything but the baby. Excuse me, doctor, I can't hear the baby. She responds. Don't you hear that dull beating? That's it. That's the heartbeat. The heartbeat? You mean the... Oh... The pen dropped. I wasn't going to hear my baby's voice. I was not going to hear her oohing or ahing. I was not going to hear a light hum or something close to a babble. I was going to hear a heartbeat. This probably paints a good picture about the difference between Shanza and I. She's a planner, a researcher, someone who's going to enter a situation well prepared. Someone with a tad bit of common sense. I, on the other hand, am going to learn on the job. Was it one of the stupidest things in the world to think your baby has a voice when they're barely the size of an apple, let alone being able to vocalize while they're living in fluid? Absolutely, it was. But hey, I didn't think about it too much. I didn't know what to expect. Anyway, moving swiftly on, 6 months later, when Shanza wakes up in the middle of the night, grumpy because she has to use the toilet in the middle of the night for the umpteenth night in a row, I'm mustering up the wakefulness to ask for a few words of comfort to console her back to sleep when she comes back. But what happens is she rushes out of the toilet and says her water has broken. That's probably a more effective way to wake someone up than throwing cold water in their face. I was awake and ready. We get our things and head to hospital. And things go great. I mean, I know I didn't have a baby clawing its way out of my recently constructed internal organs, but from what I could tell, Shanza was doing good. Great, actually. She was joking, playing, enjoying the process. We had done hypnobirthing. Not for too long, but we had practiced building associations with Allah's names and feeling tranquil. Ya Latifu. Visualizing happy thoughts with the sounds of nature. Breathing in your peace and exhaling out your fears. And repeating stories that flood calming oxytocin into the bloodstream. I was skeptical at first, but hey, it seemed to be working. I thought we were actually going to have the kind of pregnancy our instructors said we would. You won't push out the baby painfully. No. You'll breathe it out peacefully. Breathing a baby out. Wow, that's amazing. So labor starts. And it's getting tougher. But Shanza's performing like Serena Williams at Wimbledon. Effortless grace. Until things become a bit less like tennis and a bit more like planet Earth. I won't lie, it was rough. She's still performing like a champ and all, but man, that last hour felt somewhat less like the hypnobirthing serenity we were expecting. I can see hair at this point. Oh my God. She's coming out. Our baby daughter is entering this world. What I realized early on in this process, there's not that much I can do as a guy to make any of this better. Very, very little. But man, I could make things a hell of a lot worse. By saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, being less than 100% helpful at any moment. And so I was ready. My palm being crushed, my repetitive oxytocin releasing phrases that were drowned out by the screams. You can do this, Shanza. I know you can. I believe you can. Come on. You can do this. I can see her head. Oh my God. But then the midwives start to look at each other. They don't say anything, but I can sense that something is adrift. I look back at my baby's head, fully poking out, but it's unmoving. Its eyes are closed, lifeless. Why weren't the midwives doing anything anymore? One of them starts walking to the other end of the room, and the other starts talking to me. She speaks calmly, too calmly. Sir, in a few moments, some people are going to come into the room. There's no need to worry at all. You just need to... The door slams open and 5 people rush in. One of the doctors jerks me to the side. The other 2 grab Shanza's legs and lift them up, while a third starts shouting instructions about the baby's condition. At this point, I'm on the side, looking at my lifeless baby's head, standing 6 feet away from my wife who's in the worst pain of her life, as 4 strangers are trying their best to yank this fragile human out. And I realize there is nothing in the entire universe I can do at this moment other than pray to Allah. And I pray like I've never prayed before. The baby comes out, but she doesn't cry. My heart sinks. I don't know what to feel. I don't know what to think. The truth is, I did know what to think, but it scared me to think about it out loud, let alone to verbalize it. I collapse in the chair and just watch the doctors take my baby away, muttering to themselves. If anyone watches deliveries in movies, you know that the second the baby comes out, the triumphant music starts to play. Everyone's relieved, happy. But this wasn't like that. There was no music, and no one was happy. For the first time in a long time, someone calls for me. Where's the father? I get up, and in that moment, I realize my purpose. They're calling me to do skin to skin. The baby needs to have its body caressed against the chest of one of its parents. My wife isn't in the right state, so I have to jump up to the task. So I jump out of the sofa and rip off my shirt. The doctor's eyes dart down to my hairy chest, disgust almost, and says, why did you just do that? Skin to skin? I reply. Look, put your shirt on and come and watch these tests. The disgusted doctor walks away. You might think I'd be embarrassed, but I had too many hormones flowing through me to process any kind of emotion. So I went, I put my shirt on, and I witnessed my baby's tests and heard her cry for the first time. And I whispered the adhan in her ear. And I watched as she looked into my eyes, fully knowing who I was. Maybe she didn't, but I was sure that she did. And finally, about 20 minutes later, I got to do skin to skin with her, got to hold her against my bare chest, feel for a few moments maybe what she was feeling, this mutual connection that no one could explain, but even science knew was completely true. And our baby was completely healthy, alhamdulillah. But that experience, that moment of being pushed to the side and realizing that there is one true God who controls everything in this universe, and that I am nothing but an insignificant being who couldn't impact anything even if I had all the wealth and resources in the world. That feeling was the closest to God that I've ever felt. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that there is no God but Allah, and that there's no strength nor power without His might.
Wow, subhanAllah. It's amazing that it's the same birth that we've now heard for the third time, but it's a completely different perspective and view on everything that happened. I loved where he said two things in particular. I really enjoyed where he mentioned that there wasn't much that he could have done as a guy to make this better, but there was a lot that he could have done to make things a lot worse. And I found that really interesting because I think that, again, in my experience of obstetrics, a lot of fathers maybe don't realize that there is the power to actually, although maybe not improve things hugely, they do still have the power to choose what to say or choose what to do in that situation to make things a little bit easier. And I also found that in this situation that sense of urgency and emergency was much clearer. I think it's almost in contrast to Shanza's story. You can almost sort of see where she's giving birth, and obviously part of that is, I think, that there is a mercy in how she will be so immersed in that she was still so calm. But you can see that on the other side, how tense it must have been, and that sense of urgency when everybody's coming in and the doors are banging open. And I think I actually still find it difficult to realize that this is the same birth and the same baby.
Definitely. I love the contrast between the two. I think it's so evident in his voice, in the way he describes it, that his excitement and the kind of, like you said, the urgency. I think also just to mention the fact that Sheroze is a brilliant writer, filmmaker, etc. So I think that really comes across in the story. Like, I felt so engrossed, like I was almost like, if I closed my eyes, I could picture the scene, like almost like a movie going on. Also, like, if any Friends fans are out there, I'm sure they would have understood his Friends quote. Personally, I don't know what he was talking about, but at the end, how he kind of had the reflection, and he thought that no matter what I had, what power I could have had in that situation, I couldn't impact it in any way. And that really kind of reflection of Allah is He who can, affect so much and has the power in all these situations, which I thought was a really fantastic reflection for that story.
And I do think that in that situation and in any situations, I think it is in those times of powerlessness that we really realize how little power we have and how much power Allah has. And often it does take actually losing something, like losing that sense of control and losing that sense of having it all together and having a sense of vulnerability where you really realize, as he said, how powerless you really are compared to Allah. And these are the most beautiful ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us. Again, in birth, it's completely unpredictable for everyone, even people who have no risks, or people who, in this situation, Shanza's not using any pain relief, and yet the complications or all of these kind of things that Allah knows is going to happen, and we actually have zero part to play or any ability to fix, is actually such an amazing thing. And it always makes me think of the times when I have grown closest in my faith to Allah, is particularly those points when I have felt powerless and I've had to resign myself and resign everything to trusting in God and trusting in Allah alone. And I think that was just such an amazing reflection that he had as well throughout that. I must say, I do want to mention, I found it really funny when he took his shirt off and the doctor didn't want him to.
Yeah, honestly. That must have been unbelievable for the doctor as well. Can't imagine how he must have felt.
It was very sweet though, because he was, from the start of the story, you know, he's very excited for Skin to Skin, and he thought that was his time to shine, but unfortunately not. But still, alhamdulillah, really good that baby was healthy, and now the baby is like 1.5 years old, mashallah, walks around, says a few words. So alhamdulillah. So I think, alhamdulillah, we've had some amazing stories today, and they were all around the theme of Amal being born, this one baby who listeners might not know the baby personally, but can probably relate to some of the things in the story, either if they've had children, or if they know people that have had children, or if they've had new starts, because that was the main thing, right? About a new start and how they can really be part of our memories and form such solid part of what we remember going forward.
Exactly. I think these 3 stories are kind of testament to that. The fact that it was from 3 different perspectives, and all of them kind of engrossed us and made us imagine this whole scenario. And the fact that we could kind of see through their eyes just kind of shows you how impactful a new start has to someone's life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think really they've just made me so excited for future new starts that I might have, or that other people might have. And I pray, inshallah, Allah blesses us in them. So thank you so much for joining us, to all our listeners. Inshallah, we look forward to sharing more stories next week. Of course, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Submissions Podcast, and do get in touch via our website, www.submissionspodcast.com, if you want to share your own stories, and we can feature them on future episodes. We really want to hear from you, because this podcast is only made by great stories from Muslims from everywhere. And if that sounds like something you want to contribute to, then we absolutely welcome your contributions. Inshallah, next week, our episode will explore some more stories, and we hope that we will see you again next week, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for listening. I'm Inaya.
And I'm Fizan.
Thank you so much. This was Submissions.